Welcome to HVAC Full Blast, where real stories meet real solutions. Join hosts Mary Carter and Stephen Ross as they tackle how to run meetings that actually get results. Whether you're in sales, service, or management, discover the secrets for getting to decisions, building trust, and escaping the dreaded, this could have been an email, feeling. No rambling, just actionable advice and real talk. Let's get started.
Welcome back to HVAC Full Blast. I'm Mary Carter.
I'm Stephen Ross, and Mary, I'm going to try the email address. Are you ready?
Ooh, I love it.
HVAC_full_blast at tranetechnologies.com.
Lovely. Well done. Thank you for plugging.
Yeah. Well, we're always looking for feedback, right? So
yeah. We are HVAC Full Blast, and that is our email address. We have started to receive a few emails. We had someone looking for some help with some technical training, which is great. And of course, we always recommend fieldtechhelp.com. Another fun little group of words to say in a row. So nice. Fieldtechhelp.com for all your needs on our products and how we can really get you a little bit more attuned to some of the more technical side of the business. So thanks so much for that email and for reaching out. And of course, if you have a question or looking for more direction, we would love to hear from you. You want to say it one more time?
HVAC_full_blast at tranetechnologies.com.
Let's go. Love it.
Well, hey, so today's topic, here's something that comes up a lot, right? And this is a meme that floats around the internet that I probably see once a week, which is something along the lines of this email or this meeting could have been an email, right? And is that the meme? Do you? You're in corporate America. I'm on the fringes of corporate America. Is that something that gets kicked around in your world as well?
There might only be one meme that gets a little bit more attraction than that one, which is the Elmo on fire. We see that one quite a bit, but
nice. Nice.
But no, that is so true. This meeting could have been an email. We get that saying gets kicked around more often than I'd like to admit.
Yeah. What do you think? And this is a topic because it's an issue, right? It's not just like, hey, what should we talk about today? This is like an ongoing problem that I would say I, as a sales coach, have observed both with maybe in-home sales. It could be a service technician talking to a homeowner, could be a dedicated sales rep talking to a homeowner, could be maybe a business owner having a meeting with their advertising rep or their account manager. And just how do we get the most out of that time? How do we kind of like squeeze it in terms of just getting potential? So, Mary, what do you if you're walking into a new situation, what are some things you're kind of keying on in terms of, hey, new meeting with maybe a new potential client, or maybe it's an existing client that you've known for years and you're worried, and we just don't want to go down the rabbit hole of, hey, how are the kids, and stay there forever. We need to, at some point, get to some business stuff. What are you typically thinking when you walk in the door for either type of those meetings?
Great question, because there's usually a lot running through my head whenever I'm doing that kind of a meeting or a meet and greet or coming in to do the close. But a lot of those questions really start when I'm even accepting the meeting invite. And I think that there is even a step removed from showing up to a meeting, and that is getting the meeting started, sending that first invite, and giving a flavor of what is going to be happening, and understanding who's going to be attending. Two really, really key pieces of information. And this goes for selling in the home as well, right? Like, who is actually going to be in the house? Who am I meeting with today? And you don't have to say it as bluntly like, am I meeting with the decision maker? That's a little awkward, yeah. Right? But who am I meeting with today? Who is in the home? Who booked the appointment? What is their name? Knowing that is, I think it's a very, very simple step. And yet, how many times have we ever showed up to a place and all of a sudden you're flipping open your phone and you're like, oh my goodness, who are these people and what are they doing? So refreshing yourself and really knowing who's going to be at the table, I think, is so critical. And then the part two of that is, why are we meeting? So you had laid out a couple of different scenarios of, is it a new dealer? Are we just checking in on someone? But unless I really have a reason to be there, why are we meeting? Why are we meeting in the first place? Really should be defined. If it is to close new business, then in the invite to the meeting, I want to say, hey, hey, business owner, really looking forward to discussing how we can win more of your business. I will be bringing in a manufacturing rep to this discussion. If you have any concerns ahead of time, please feel free to reach out to me, and, look forward to seeing you then. That just sets the tone right away that I'm taking this really seriously, and this is how it's going to be. Likewise, too, on home services, and I don't mean to go on and on, but I've seen this done really well, even just in my own house and with my own shopping. When you get that email that says, here's what to expect from your service appointment, wow.
Yeah.
Like, now as a homeowner, I'm like, wow, this company's taking me really seriously. They value my time. They're giving me an idea of maybe what's about to happen. We don't know what we don't know. I don't know how long they're potentially going to need to look at my equipment or talk to me. And even if that whole thing, gets a little skewed, probably because I tend to ramble, at least I knew. At least I had an idea going in.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is, and the reason I kind of wanted to start with, hey, what do you do in your world, is that, at Sandler, one of the things we say is that human psychology is human psychology. And so it's people talking to people. The application of that psychology may change in situation to situation, right? But the underlying psychology, a lot of times, is going to hold true regardless. And so I think one of those principles that this is one that carries over to in-home sales, is that we don't necessarily think of it as, well, it's not a meeting, right? Like I'm just going out to meet with the homeowner or talk to them, or and maybe saying, well, it sounds very formal to call it a meeting or to say I have to have an agenda or those kinds of things. But the underlying psychology is true, whether it's me meeting with my banker to talk through, like, what are some of the things coming up over the next year or two, financially in the business, or me meeting with a homeowner. Like, the psychology is going to be the same. And so that setting up the meeting well is a skill set that a lot of people lack. And that skill set costs us money. It costs us in terms of efficiency and time, but also it shows up in closing ratios and average tickets as well. And so that just running an effective meeting, whether it's in that business to business scenario or business to consumer, business to homeowner, like, that is a skill that I think a lot of people are missing.
I want to break down the agenda piece, right? Because I'm going to expose myself here, but I never thought that the agenda creation was a necessary part of having a meeting. And I do a lot of B2B meetings, but I never subscribed to that. And I was like, I don't need it. I'm good without it. It wasn't until I actually started having an agenda that I realized this wasn't even so much for the structure of my meeting. This was for me, Mary, to stay on task and then also remember what we spoke about and take better notes. I mean, I have sections now where I can clearly say, oh, this was a chunk of time where we spent 20 minutes, and this was a chunk of time where we spent 5 minutes. And so I know that I need to put a little bit more energy into the things that were important to them in that more, fruitful chunk. And I never thought of an agenda as that way until I really started setting better meetings. And it opened up my world to being a more effective worker bee.
Yeah. Yeah. From a sales training standpoint, here's how this shows up a lot of times in phone calls that I have. I might have a phone call with, let's say, a VP of sales or director of sales. Sometimes it's a CEO, sometimes it's a business owner. And so they'll say things like this: hey, I've got a great sales team. They work hard. They're good people. They care. They've got no problem walking in the door and striking up a conversation. And so then I kind of go, well, then why are we talking? What's the issue? And they go, well, we're having a hard time closing business. That's the issue. And so they'll say something like this, hey, Stephen, we just need a class on closing. We do everything else well. We just need a class on closing. And really what we know both at Sandler, but then also, again, just psychology backs this up. And Sandler is a process very much grounded in just human psychology, right? That's the beginning of it. But if you want to end the meeting well, you have to begin the meeting well. And if you want to be a great closer, what you really got to be in sales is a great opener. And those two things go hand in hand. I think that concept gets missed a lot. And especially if you think about who goes into sales. I know when I first got into sales, the only reason that I got into sales was, one, I was in college for liberal arts. What are you going to do with that, right? And then two, people were like, well, dude, you're an extrovert. You should go be in sales. That was it. So if you're like me and that's how you got into sales, is just you liked talking to people, then the challenge that you have is that actually becomes a weakness for you in sales, is that you just walk in and you just start talking and you don't really have a direction. You don't know where you're going. There's no roadmap. There's no train tracks. It's just, hey, I'm going to walk in the door and wing it. And that gets you, that can get you a decent ways in a career. I mean, I got to the point where with absolutely no sales training, I mean, I was making 70, 80 grand a year. But what it will never do is get you to the point where you're making $200,000, $300,000 a year in sales. That actually comes from structure and process and all these things that sometimes extroverts aren't good at.
I know. And then they gave two extroverts a podcast. Like, what were they thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had to work on our process here, but
yeah, but I can totally relate. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, this is, again, I actually kind of already had said it, but when I started in sales, it was for the same reasons. You're an extrovert, you're good at talking to people. People seem to form trust with you really quickly. We think you'd be great for this. Great. I like to make money. Let's go make some money. And it wasn't until I really honed in my process that I actually made better relationships. I fostered even more trust. And that, again, as someone who prides himself on having the gift of gab and just being able to be witty and sarcastic and whatnot, I just didn't even think that those things were important. I left all of that to the side probably for too long. And now that I'm actually incorporating that into my meetings, you see a difference in just the way that you foster that relationship.
So let's pull from Stephen Covey. So Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the things he says is you got to begin with the end in mind, right? So in one of your meetings, if you're just thinking of a meeting that you had last week or one coming up next week, I mean, beginning with the end in mind, like what are good outcomes for the meetings that you're in? What are you gunning for? Let's say you're meeting with a heating and air contractor. Like what's the end of the meeting going to look like?
Hold on now. Am I the homeowner?
No. I mean, you're like, you work for Trane. You're
okay.
Walking the door. This is a B2B meeting. Yeah. And you're talking to a contractor. Like, what do you want? What do you want the end of the meeting to be like? How does it end in a best case scenario?
So if I'm meeting with a heating and air company and I'm a manufacturing rep and I'm, repping my company, what I want out of the meeting is I want them to feel like they have made the right choice by choosing to sell my brand. I want them to feel so comforted by the fact that I'm their manufacturing rep and their distribution partner is taking care of them end to end. I want them to feel so good about that relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? So, I mean, we're just kind of reverse engineering the psychology a little bit. And so we would say, bonding and rapport, that would be a key Sandler principle, right? Which is we want them to feel like, hey, this is a good decision. And then and I'm going to just parallel here a little bit. If I'm the dealer and I'm meeting with the homeowner, what do I want? I want the same thing. So totally. I'm going to want that homeowner, one, I want them to make a decision to go with me. And I want them to feel comfortable with it. Not that they were forced into it because their old system was broken or we got them over a barrel and they got no other choice, right? Like I want them to go, hey, this is a good decision. I'm glad I'm working with this company. And so that piece of it is huge for sure. I think the other one that we harp on a little bit is, going back to the meme of this meeting could have been an email. I think the biggest differentiator between meetings that could have been an email versus productive meetings, I would say the number one differentiator is what decisions are we making, right?
Yes.
In the case of and I've had reps call on me before at a few of the companies I worked at where we were buying $4, $5, $6 million a year of equipment and ductwork and parts and supplies or whatever else. And so the rep comes and calls on me. They vomit information all over me for 30 or 45 minutes and then they leave. And that's the definition of that could have been an email. If you're just simply here to give me information, put it in an email and send it to me. I mean, that's the whole purpose? So in my world, I would say a good meeting is where we're coming to a decision, whatever that decision is, whatever the outcome is, because if there's no decision being made at all, then there's no point to having a meeting. So I think that's, for me, I would say that's number one. If I want to know, if I, like you said before, I get an email invite of, hey, let's have a meeting, I want to know, what are we deciding? And if we're not deciding anything, if it's just somebody like, hey, I want to tell you about what's going on, I'm like, nope, like that, send me an email,
I see that really often with new product announcements, right? So new products coming out and, we've got features, we got benefits, we got some jazzy marketing around it. Maybe there's a sales sheet and all of a sudden we have this inclination to have a meeting. We got to have a meeting about this. We got to talk about this. Well, what if the product historically has no place in that market? Oftentimes a product announcement is going nationwide most of the time. What if this isn't a product that this group cares about? What if they have already made it clear to you, that maybe they go with another partner for that product? And yeah, we could try to win some business there and maybe, capture a little bit more share of wallet. Or maybe they've already let you know, hey, being a multi-branded distribution house is part of our strategy, and therefore you have no shot, right? There's definitely cues and things that you can pick up on. If I, as a good salesperson, just have any kind of inclination that maybe this isn't going to be where we're going to spend a bulk of our time and energy, absolutely, that's an email. Hey, we got a new product coming out. Want you to know about it. Understand we've got these strategies going on. If you're interested in some change, here you go. This one's for you. But that's not a one-size-fits-all email. For my market now that all of a sudden does care about that product, or where that might be a great solution, or maybe I have more of an in and a chance to make a conversion, I'm having a meeting. And I'm going to sit down, I'm going to explain it to you. And, you can be judicious with the information that you're giving out, and strategic, right? So that your time is spent a little bit more wisely as well. And I think that's the same with homeowners. Again, just trying to relate it a little bit to in-home sales, but not everything that your business sells is going to fit every homeowner. And really listening to what's important to them and then solutionizing based on that. I mean, I know we teach that here all the time, but that's the key. That's the key to getting to an effective call or an effective meeting.
So we try to, sometimes we oversimplify some things at Sandler, but one of the ways we would say that is no is my second favorite answer, because what really kills salespeople in terms of our efficiency and our productivity and everything else that goes into this, and again, from a coaching standpoint, here's how this comes up. Let's say I'm coaching an individual sales producer, in-home sales, and they're selling heating and air equipment, and they're selling $2.5 million a year. That's a pretty good sales rep. They're good. They're not great, but they're good. And so we have a conversation. They say, well, hey, I want to get to 3 million. I want to get to 4 million. I maybe want to get to 5 million, right? All right. Well, if you asked a room full of salespeople, hey, who wants to make twice as much money? I mean, every hand goes up. Right? If you're talking to a territory manager and they're like, hey, my territory is 8 million. And you go, okay, well, what do you have to do to get it to 16 million? I mean, here's the challenge. If you just keep doing what you're doing, you have to work twice as much. So if you're already working a 40-hour week to sell 2.5 million in home, and you say, I want to get to 5 million, well, now you got to work an 80-hour week. If your territory is an $8 million territory and you want to get to 16, well, now you got to work 80 hours a week. And that doesn't work. And we all go, well, wait a minute, that doesn't work. So this this piece that you just kind of articulated with, hey, not everything's a good fit. I think that is the number one thing salespeople need to understand is if you want to double your territory, you got to get some quick no's. If something's not a good fit, if it's not going to work, if somebody's not interested, not every customer, not every product fits every customer, like you just said, you have to quickly eliminate the I'll call you back, I'll think it over, I'll get back to you. Let me think on that a little bit and email you next week. Let me run that by my team and see what they think. Like those things are time killers. And again, it doesn't matter whether this is in-home sales or B2B. The quick no, and so that's why we say it's our second favorite answer. A quick yes is my favorite answer, but a quick no is my second favorite answer, because what will absolutely kill me is I want to think it over. I'll get back to you. Let me talk to somebody else and see what they think. Those things, you just cannot double your sales if you're going to tolerate that as an outcome of a meeting, for sure.
Yeah, I call those that third bucket of like the I don't knows, let me think about it. It's my wafflers. They're just I got no time for wafflers over here. All right, we gotta keep it moving.
So if we're kind of, again, Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. If we're working our way backwards and we say, hey, I want to be a great closer at the end. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means you're getting the customer to make a decision, and I'm okay with no's. Meaning, it's not a high pressure sale. I'm not forcing everybody to buy. If it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. But if it's not a good fit, what I need to know, and the customer, again, whether this is a homeowner or whoever I'm selling to, they need to know it's not a good fit too. We got to be able to share that with each other to say, this isn't a good fit. I'm going to move on a different direction, because that's the number one way in which I could double my territory is get quicker no's, for sure. Now you got to couple that with, I got to go find more customers. I got to get some yeses, right? And that's hard. I mean, we as salespeople, we've done some mindset podcast episodes where we've touched on that. But you talk about that scarcity mentality versus a growth mindset. And that scarcity mentality is, oh my gosh, I got to force every customer to buy everything I got because I don't have any more customers to go get, right? And that mindset kills you at this point in the sale. If you're not okay getting a no, you're really going to struggle in sales on multiple fronts. But time management is probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, if time management is a struggle, then you're going to become a margin eroder real fast, because you're going to do anything you can to be dropping points from that ticket to get somebody to say yes, because that's where it's going to end. That's where it's going to end up. Well, what can I do to make you say yes? Well, you can make it cheaper. Boom, there goes your profit, right?
Yeah.
So, that's a tough one. So, and agenda keeping. So, talk to me maybe a little bit about, because again, sitting in the B2B seat, right? Setting an agenda ahead of time. I try to. I'll be honest. I don't always take my advice. Crazy. I don't know if I always do a best practice of laying out the agenda in the invite so much as maybe I just highlight a couple of topics and make sure that it's known who the parties are going to be that are present at the table. But when I'm in the meeting, I usually always start with just a quick hit agenda. And I really do make that a quick hit. We don't have to linger on this agenda and make it like a grandstand event. Like, hey, we're going to cover some of these topics. Use this as a reference when I leave you with this deck, because I always do that too. But talk to me a little bit more maybe about, like, on a B2C level, what an agenda looks like. Because if it feels a little formal to set a meeting, it's going to feel real formal to set an agenda.
Yeah. And I think here's why I like starting with outcomes. So in terms of priority, outcomes is your biggest priority. If you're in sales, being able to clearly articulate outcomes for a meeting, that's a crucial skill. I cannot overstate how important that is. And it is just like any other skill, whether it's fishing, shooting basketballs, shooting a gun, playing a sport, like the better you get, I mean, it's those repetitions matter. But that's crucial. And so then, because this now impacts, when we're talking about agenda, but what is it we're going to decide today? Mentally, we need to start with that. What is it we're going to decide today? And then, okay, from the agenda items, just become, well, what do we need to talk about so that we can make that decision at the end, right? And if there's agenda items that don't really matter to that outcome, we need to either table those or figure out another time to talk about them, or does it need to be talked about at all? I mean, those kind of things. So you are reverse engineering your sales call. So in the B2C world, it's interesting to think about what are the homeowner's expectations versus, say, what are my expectations if I'm walking in the door, and how do we get on the same, I don't know, whatever, that same field. I mean, because sometimes we're miles apart. And I just give you kind of a quick run through. If I called a sales guy and I said, all right, you're going to go see a homeowner, how much time do you think you need? The sales guy is going to say, well, I mean, I need an hour and a half. I mean, I really need to figure out what's going on in that house, what's important to them, and so on. If you called a homeowner and you said, hey, you got a heating and air guy coming over, he's going to give you some price on equipment, how much time do you think they need? The homeowner's going to say like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, because in their perspective is you're going to walk in, you're going to look at a box, and you're going to go, oh, well, here's what it costs to replace that box. Like, how much time do you really need? So
I have been this homeowner. I was dumbfounded when it must have been a dispatcher had called me and said, Steven's going to be coming out to you to talk about your system, and the whole appointment should take an hour, an hour and a half. And I was like, I don't have time for that. What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. And here's what happens on the B2C side. So a homeowner pushes back. So sometimes the very first objection, we talk about objections and overcoming objections a lot in sales. And what we think of when we think of overcoming objections is we get to the end and they say, wow, you're too expensive. Your price is too high, right? But the first objection that you get in a sales call a lot of times is time, which is, hey, I need an hour. The homeowner's like, no, you don't. You got 15 minutes. And so then you've got a decision to make. What do you do? And what happens sometimes, and you may have a competitor that maybe they got there first. The homeowner says, I got 15 minutes. And so what happens is the guy goes, oh, okay, well, I got my book right here. Let's walk around the house. Can you walk with me? And hey, your air conditioner says 36. Does that seem to keep the house cool? And your furnace is, it's a 90,000 BTU furnace. How'd that work? You good with your thermostat? It seemed all right. So you want a Wi-Fi? No. Okay. How about filters? You like changing your filters every month, or you want me to put one in? Okay, great. And so they sit back down, and then in 15 minutes, they spit out a price. So sometimes the homeowner's perspective is, well, if they could give me a price in 15 minutes, Mary, why can't you give me a price in 15 minutes? And so what's the assumption the homeowner makes? What are you going to do with that extra 45 minutes? Their assumption is you're just going to beat them over the head and try to beat them down. I mean, so that sometimes that's the hang up right there, right at the very beginning.
So essentially the first agenda item is setting an expectation around time.
I would say so. And especially when, if anybody's ever had a bad experience with a salesperson, and it could be, the stereotypical one is like a timeshare sales pitch, or, who knows, where the strategy a lot of times is to wear you down. And so they're going to keep you there for 2, 3, 4 hours. And by the end, you're mentally exhausted, and maybe they can force you to sign something. So if the buyer has ever had that kind of experience, then time is a big piece to the resistance, because they're like, oh my God, no, I'm not giving you more time. That's where you try to wear me down and beat me up, and I don't want that. So I'm not going to allow that to happen. I think time is probably, you got to address that real close to the beginning of the call, because that could be an objection coming at you. The other one I would say, kind of around agendas, it's worth, here's where I think a lot of sales calls get derailed, is in that agenda step. So let's say the agenda step, we had 2 or 3 things we wanted to talk about, like I had an issue with a warranty part in the past. Well, what happens sometimes is if you're the person, the customer that I'm meeting with, and we're going through the agenda, and I'm like, hey, Mary, what are some things you want to talk about? And you're like, well, I've got a warranty issue. It's tempting to the salesperson and the person with the warranty issue to say, well, let's handle that right now. And what we never really did was we never properly set up the sales call. We just got to the first agenda item and then started the meeting. And we never really kind of fleshed out the agenda to say, what are all the points in the agenda? And we never really discussed outcomes. And outcomes that's the thing we got to get to. And if we don't, it's just going to cost us money. So that, I think those two things, time is maybe the starting point where we can get derailed real easily. And then the second one in that agenda step is it's super tempting to start the meeting without the full agenda on the table, and we cannot do that. Those are the two probably most common mistakes I would see.
Yeah, I mean, one way I've always thought about that is facilitate, don't dictate, right? Like I'm not here to be a stenographer and take down every single note and make a checklist. Like I'm here to facilitate a conversation that is hopefully going to lead towards you making a decision. And that is only going to be accomplished if we really lay out everything that we're going to talk about. If I just start doing a Taskmaster live in front of you, you're going to say, wow, Mary's really efficient, but now she just got done what I needed, and I don't really need her anymore.
Yeah. Here's, when I talk about costing people money, here's a real clear example. So I was a Sandler client for 3 or 4 years while doing in-home sales. And so I was getting a little bit better. I had a sales coach that was mentoring me and kicking my butt and trying to make me better. And so my first year as a Sandler client, my sales went up about 30%. And what I got good at was very concisely talking about equipment rather than having just long conversations where I'm explaining everything from spine fin coils to CFM to so on, like just being able to very simply talk about equipment in terms that included emotions, meaning here's what other homeowners like about this system, right? That concept there, just almost single-handedly by itself, I probably made 20 to 30% more sales just off that concept. The second year, I would say I really focused on question asking technique. Could I get really, really good at sitting down with the homeowner and asking questions? Because again, from that, what's their perception of how this meeting is going to go? If you called the sales rep and you said, hey, you're going to go out and see this homeowner, who's going to do most of the talking? The sales rep says, well, I need the homeowner to do the talking. I need them to tell me about their house and what their goals are and what their budget is. And so I need the homeowner to do the talking. If I call the homeowner and I said, hey, the heating and air sales guy is on his way to your house, who do you think is going to do most of the talking? The homeowner is going to say the heating and air guy is going to do most of the talking. So time, a lot of times we're misaligned there. They think it's going to take 15 minutes. We think it's going to take an hour. Who's going to do the talking? They assume it's me. I'm hoping it's them. And so that question asking techniques, like that's real crucial because you've got to flip that script a little bit to get them talking. And then, so my sales went up another 20% in my second year just because I got better at asking questions. But when I got real good at asking about outcomes, and this is why I think this is just number one on the priority list, that third year, my sales went up another 40% on top, cumulative, on top of 20%, on top of 20%. I had this 40% jump because I got really good at talking about outcomes and meaning, hey, this meeting needs to end with a yes or a no. And that's whatever that means. And if I'm meeting with my banker, if I'm meeting with an advertising rep, if I'm meeting with a homeowner, what are we deciding, yes or no? And just thinking through things that way, very, very much streamline things so that I could more than double my sales in about a 3-year period, because you're able to get through things quicker and make decisions. And no's are okay. If the answer is a no, hey, no problem. I tracked my closing ratios. So my closing ratio when I first started as a Sandler client was about 40%. And it was about 50-50 in terms of the number of times I closed in-home on the spot, like a one-call close, versus I had to do follow-up or they got back to me later, right? So 20% of the time I closed in the house on the spot, 20% of the time I closed through follow-up. 3 years later, my closing ratio was at about 58%. And about 40% of that was in-home on the spot. And then the other 18% was through follow-up. And that just goes to show, like, just what I got really, really good at was setting up the sales call so that I could one-call close it. And that's just not how a lot of us are wired in sales from the very beginning.
Yeah. I can even tell you from meetings where maybe the conversation got off the rails, like, we didn't bring it back to objectives and why we were there and why the meeting was set in the first place. Like we just kind of kept rambling on and on and on until, you're kind of looking for an out. And I mean, imagine
Yeah.
doing that with a homeowner, right? Like I think one thing about setting calls and meetings, if you've set it that expectation of that time commitment, well, you better kind of keep that commitment. And if all of a sudden we're just standing there talking and talking and talking, we got nowhere to go. Um, when are you gonna leave? How many homeowners did you ever meet with who were just like too? I'm sure you met with some that were happy to say get out and out, but maybe they were just too polite for their own good, right? And then the next thing you know, you're looking at pictures of the kids and hanging out.
Yeah.
Like we got to keep it moving. I think it is a little bit on the meeting setter to honor that timeline.
For sure. And it's, we talk about trust and how do you get people to trust you and what is trust? And, if we boil it down in the business world to what is trust, it really comes down to, are you going to do what you said you're going to do? And people don't have a way to evaluate that early on. They don't know me. They've never met me before. They found us in Google or whatever it was. And so this idea of, are you going to do what you said you're going to do, is just a big unknown. We can say we're the greatest heating and air company in the world and we sell great products and we got great people and all that kind of stuff, but can we back it up? And so the only way people have initially to judge you on that, are you going to do what you said you're going to do, is do you start on time and end on time with the meeting? That's it. So, like you said, that confirmation email of, hey, we got you scheduled for tomorrow. We're going to be there at whatever time, between 2 and 3 or something like that. If it's a residential call, you got to be there between 2 and 3. And then the same thing holds true, like at the end, like when you say, hey, this is going to take about an hour. If it takes 3 hours and you are just kind of wearing them down and wearing them out, if that's your strategy, what you're really doing is losing trust. And it's interesting because there are sales strategies that go on that premise. One of my first ever sales training classes I did was in 2011, and it was down in Florida. We had a bunch of different dealers in the room. And I just was asking, hey, what's your closing technique? And these two guys from this company in Florida said, hey, we don't leave. And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, we're talking about closing techniques. They're like, yeah, we just don't leave the house. And I was like, what do you mean you don't leave the house? They're like, well, we just stay there till they buy. I'm like, so you have 100% closing ratio? And they're like, oh, yeah, no, we don't have 100% closing ratio. Well, then if they don't buy, how do you leave? And they go, they throw us out. That's the only way they would leave. That was kind of their strategy. So they learned that somewhere, right? Like somebody came in and said, all right, here's the deal. We're not leaving until they buy or they throw us out. And here's the problem with that is lots of problems, but two that'll show up in the business world really easily. One is you're going to have a high cancellation rate. They'll agree to a sale when you're there, but then they've got that 3-day right to cancel. I mean, you're going to have this high cancellation rate, and now you got to fight people to keep them on the books after they try to cancel. And then number two is you get 0 referrals. Even if they do buy from you, nobody's going to say to their neighbor, oh, hey, call this guy. He'll come hang out in your house for 3 or 4 hours till you finally throw him out. So those are the business ramifications of that type of sales process. It's not good long-term business, which seems self-explanatory, but there's people out there trying it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why the 3-day notice of right to cancel exists, because companies had predatory practices where they didn't leave. So that is literally a call in response to that. That's so interesting. I had one recently, and you're very good at sharing stories from the real world, so I thought I would bring this one up. But I was invited to a meeting, and this was a new dealer that we were bringing on, and we worked really hard to get them a great sales plan, a couple of incentives, lots of promises being made, commitments, and big commitments come big incentives, right? So working through a nice deal, putting together a package. And I was invited to the meeting, and the premise of the meeting was, yep, guy's coming on board. This is going to be great. We're going to sign contracts and, just welcome him to the brand. Love it. So I show up to the meeting, all excited, all chipper, like this is going to be a great day. Like I'm paying for lunch. Everyone's going to get what they want, right? And I meet the principal and I shake his hand and I said, well, welcome to the family. And he said, "Oh, is this a done deal?" And I said, "Is this not?" And it was very awkward. And that is when I knew that, unfortunately, this was not a done deal, and we had a little bit more selling to do. So immediately, backtrack that and, put on my sales hat and whatnot and get to work. What I learned later was that the lure of coming to the meeting was to make it, seem like we had all of our ducks in a row. But unfortunately, I think that got oversold and a little overhyped. And what it did is exactly what you said earlier, is it just broke trust. It broke trust in, how we set up meetings, which customers we go visit to, which customers we put plans together with, right? And we've got to have that. So we're going to work on that with my people, and we're going to get better at it. But yeah, wow, nothing's worse than being, handed the alley oop and just missing.
Yeah, that's rough. Well, here's what if I could, I thought I would just kind of run through a role play with you, because sometimes we're talking about all these concepts, but we're like, hey, how does this really work in the real world, right? And so let's like if we just kind of run through it, and I'm kind of making my notes here, because here's what I would do when I walked into a homeowner's house. A lot of times I would have a notebook or a notepad that's got blank paper on it. And so I'm walking in with pen in hand and paper, or maybe I've got an iPad that I can walk, but the body language is I'm going to take some notes, which conveys to the other person, you're going to say something important and I'm going to write it down. So I'm letting them know just by my body language, they're going to need to do some talking, because I'm here to take some notes, right? So a lot of times, if we just ran through it, here's what this would sound like, I think, in the residential setting. So I would walk in the door and I would say, "Hey, Mary, I'm Steven. I'm with Steven's Heating and Air Conditioning. Appreciate you inviting me out today. Were you expecting me?" I would say something along those lines. Now, a lot of times I would probably have called on the way to say, "Hey, I'm 15 minutes out. I'm 20 minute out." I think in 2025, maybe the best way to do that is a text message like, "Hey, this is Steven. I'm with Steven's Heating and Air. I'm on my way out. I should be there at 1:15 or something." But in theory, when I walk up, knock on the door, "Hi, I'm Steven, Steven's Heating and Air. Were you expecting me today?" Just confirming that piece of it. And then I'm gonna talk about time. I want to say, "Hey, Mary, typically an appointment like this takes 60 to 90 minutes. Does that work for you today?" Where do you, help me brainstorm on the possible things that a homeowner could say. Like, what are some of the ones, like, where does this go off the rails right there? Or what do you think most homeowners are like, yeah, all right, 60, 90 minutes?
Well, I'm sure that most homeowners are like, is it really going to take 60 minutes, or can you make it like 30? Because I've got things to do.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think sometimes people just flat out say, you got 15 minutes. A lot of times, if we've done a good job, and this is really kind of your evaluating your processes as a company, the person who set the appointment, whether it was on the phone or maybe it was a service technician or whoever, did they say, "Hey, these appointments take about an hour"? We're sending a confirmation email or a confirmation text that should say, "Hey, the appointment takes an hour." So if we've done a pretty good job kind of preparing that customer, then when I get there and I say, "Hey, the appointment takes about an hour," it should be okay. But I get a lot of just an hour, really. And again, I think a lot of that is your competitors did a sales call in 15 minutes. And so they're like, what did that guy do what are you going to do that guy didn't do?
I totally agree. And I just want to also maybe add a kudo to, never give awesome away for free. Putting that reminder and that text message or that phone call as part of your process, that took time, right? That took developing that process. That takes work to do those things. Now, it might not be a lot of work, and depending on how savvy you are with your systems and processes, maybe it's just one click for that text message to go out. But you never give awesome away for free, and make sure you remind them that you did that, So when you knock on the door, "Hey, just checking in, confirming that you thought I was going to be here, and what time do you think this is going to take?" it's just an immediate recall for the homeowner to be like, oh yeah, I've had some interactions with this company already. Boom, done. I mean, simple. That's a buzzy kind of concept that is really simply done.
I think if you've been in sales, and I'm old now, so but back when I got started, they would say things like, "Hey, if the decision makers both aren't there, reschedule. If
Mm.
the homeowner's like, I don't have an hour, reschedule." And that's changed today. Here's why that's changed: is if they don't have an hour today, they're not going to have an hour tomorrow.
Mm.
If they're stalling or objecting, then just saying, "Hey, let's reschedule." If we don't resolve whatever the underlying objection is, then we don't reschedule. And Sandler, we've got some corporate research that comes out of our home office in Maryland. And one of the things they'll tell us is that a rescheduled sales call never happens about 40 to 45% of the time. So what I would tell my sales reps is, hey, we've spent $250 to get you this lead in between the Google and the van wraps and the billboards and everything else, right? You're not rescheduling. So we have to figure out what can we do while we're there to at least get the next steps lined up. So what can't happen is the sales rep show up at the door, the homeowner say, I only got 15 minutes. And the sales rep says, okay, well, I'll have the office call you to reschedule and get back in your car and leave. Cannot happen. I think
That's
the other thing that, go ahead.
that's almost like we call these people like the wafflers, right? That's almost like putting them right in the waffle iron. Like, no problem.
Yeah. I think the other thing is you can't do a 15-minute sales call, right? Because we just said, all right, if your competitors do that, you walk around the house, you're like, all right, 3-ton air conditioner, 90,000 BTU furnace, how's the thermostat, your filter, okay, great, here's a price. We've had zero chance to build value. We haven't differentiated ourselves. And so unless we're the cheapest company in the market, which we're never going to be, our closing ratios are going to be in the single digits. So we can't do a 15-minute sales call. We can't reschedule. So what do we do? And I think the solution there is to say, hey, let's take 15 minutes, see how far we get. And then I'm going to give control to the homeowner. So I would say, Mary, in 15 minutes, you decide what you want me to do. Do you want me to come back later to finish? Do you want me to stick around a little longer today? Let's see how far we get and see what happens. And so if you're going to give me 15 minutes, I'm going to take the 15 minutes. Now, going back to what we said before, I have to then stop in 15 minutes and say, hey, Mary, we're at about the 15-minute mark. I might be able to give them a better estimate for time. Mary, I think it's only going to take about 30 more minutes. It won't take the full hour. You okay if I just stick it out today, or would you want me to come back? And so the way I view that is from that bonding and rapport standpoint, I took the 15 minutes that the homeowner gave me. I'm now earning the next 30 minutes. I got to be able to earn my next 30 minutes. And I almost never have had an issue with that, because I think most of the time hey, I only got 15 minutes is a smokescreen, especially if we told them the appointment's going to take an hour.
I think I honestly think that's probably true. And as someone who's probably done that to an in-home service person at my own house, I know it's true. So
Yeah.
that's a super fair point. And I'm guessing that in that 15 minutes now, where you need to earn the next 30 minutes, you're not just shooting the breeze about how cute the dog is and how hard the weather's been, right? Like, we got to get to work.
We got to get to work, which rolls into that agenda piece that you were talking about. And I think I like to start with the customer's agenda, because this is a little bit of a verbal negotiation. They want something from us and we want something from them. So what do they want from us? Well, they want a proposal. They want to know what it's going to cost. What are my options? What are my choices? What can I do? What do we want from them? Well, here's what I would say is what I want from them is a decision. I would love a yes, but I'll take a no. What I won't take is, hey, I'll think about it and get back to you, right? So I got to be able to phrase that politely, but that's from an agenda standpoint. I'm thinking through, okay, if we're going to ask for that, what do we want? What do they want? Then let's get their agenda out on the table first. So a lot of times I'm going to say, now at the heating and air companies of the people listening to this call, maybe you guys run perfectly. At my heating and air company, we would occasionally screw things up. So the other purpose to confirming the agenda is make sure that the notes weren't just copy and pasted from the previous customer we screwed up. But I would say something like this: Mary, I understand you've had some trouble with your furnace. You're looking to get some pricing on a new one. Is that correct? That's usually kind of my intro.
Which is a great intro, right? Because chances are I didn't just cold call a heating and air
Right.
company. So, and if I'm already telling you I'm stressed for time, just address my issue. If along the way you find more things that you want to maybe address with me, maybe now I'm into it because you're taking me seriously and you're addressing my concern.
I think it's worth too here, and this is where again my first couple years as a Sandler client, I would have told you I did a pretty good agenda step, right? But I wasn't great at it, and this is one of the areas where I would skip through really quickly. So what I might do, like here's an example of me doing it poorly versus what I learned to do later on. Stephen 101 or 1.0, I might have said something like this: "Hey, Mary, understand your furnace has had some issues. You're getting some pricing. Is that right?" You say yes. And then I'm like, okay, well, here's what I need to do today. And so I asked you a yes or no question and it stopped right there. And then I'm like, oh, well, let me talk about myself. And what I learned to do was slow down a little bit and say, Mary, sorry to hear that. Tell me a little bit more about what's been going on. Mm-hmm. If I can get that customer to talk a little bit, share some history, even just some follow-up questions like, what else, Mary, would you like to talk about while I'm here? Sometimes the homeowner didn't think about anything else. They're like, I don't know. And I could say occasionally like, well, Mary, sometimes people will say, I'm curious about insulation. Do I have enough in the attic? We've got some other rooms in the house. Like, is there anything? And I'm not selling any of those things yet, but I'm planting the seeds that, hey, other homeowners sometimes want to talk about that. Are those any things? Do you want to talk about your air conditioner too, or just the furnace? Do you want to talk about insulation, airflow in the house? Do you want to talk about filters and pets or anything like that? Or we just kind of look at the furnace? I'm going to come back and ask those questions later because I'm still in the agenda step. But I'm just asking Mary, do you think we should put any of those on the agenda? And so me slowing down, again, it just made me more money. It was hard to learn because I wanted to just skip through, but breathe deep, slow down. And the rule of 3, ask 2 or 3 questions as a follow-up to that first question. So I've got to ask at least 3 questions total in the agenda step to really get that person to open up a little bit.
I use this all the time in B2B as well. Tell me a little bit about what's going on with your business. How has the year been working for you? And then pause. And this is a great technique to get people to start opening up because most people that I meet with say, things have been good and they're running pretty well. And you wouldn't, by the sentence 3 or 4, they are talking about a problem. But they just started with, oh, it's good, it's great, and I think that's a little bit of the human psychology too. Like, I'm not just going to come out the gate and be like, things are on fire and everything. If once we close this office door, I'm going to start crying. Like, that's not going to happen. But just tell me a little bit about what's going on. What are you seeing this year?
Yeah.
What have your observations been? And give them the mic to talk and to give you that information. And then one thing I also have done a little bit with the agenda piece that I am picking up from you as well is, so here are some topics that I need to address with you today and that I wanted to talk about. Is there anything you wanted to talk about during this time as well? And this is maybe like level 2, even for myself, because level 0 was I didn't even believe in agendas. Now I started incorporating agendas, but I wasn't always mindful that maybe my invitee had topics to talk about. And so now, my level 2 step has really been to say, okay, I got to chew through these topics. I know we have an hour together. Is there anything you might want to bring up? Because I want to be sensitive to your time. And even if in the beginning of the meeting, my client is saying to me, no, that looks good. Let's get started. By the end of the meeting, they've thought of something that they want to bring up. Yeah. And that is okay. We just got to, check in and do some of that talking. You want it to be conversational.
Yeah. I think when my agenda comes out, one of the things I want to keep in mind with my agenda is back to that concept of building trust. Mm-hmm. If I just show up at your house one morning at 10 a.m., that doesn't build trust. If I tell you that I'm going to show up at your house at 10 a.m. and then I show up at 10 a.m., that builds trust, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the same thing holds true with a homeowner is we could have a great process, but if we don't tell the homeowner what the process is at the beginning, we've lost the opportunity to build trust. So under my agenda, if I'm thinking through that mentally, what I want to do here is tell the homeowner what I need to do. And so this is again that kind of that verbal negotiation. What do they want? Well, I want a price on a furnace. Okay. Well, here's what I need to do in order to get you that price on that furnace that you need. And I tended to phrase it here's kind of my run through for in-home sales is I would say, Mary, first thing I'd like to do, if it's okay, is kind of sit and talk. And then I'll describe what does that look like. Maybe we could sit in the living room, kitchen table, wherever. I kind of put my bag down, pull my notebook out, take some notes, right? Sit and talk. I've got some questions for you. You probably got some questions for me. Mary, once I have a good idea of kind of what your objectives here are, then I'm going to need to walk around and take a look. And again, I'm going to describe what does that look like. I mean, when I say walk around and take a look, what am I looking at? And again, I keep in mind that a lot of our competitors, what are they looking at? Well, they're looking at the outdoor unit, they're looking at the indoor unit, maybe they look at the thermostat, and then they're going to give the homeowner a price. Part of me differentiating is I got to look at the whole house. That's actually a little different. So even if the unit's under the house, I need to look in the attic. Even if the unit's outside, like I got to walk around the bedrooms and I'm going to look and see where the supply vents are. And do we have enough supply vents? And where are the returns? Where do you change your filters? And so I got to describe all of that to the homeowner because that helps them understand why I need an hour. I'm going to look and see where you change your filters. I'm going to count the supply vents and see where they're located. I'm going to measure the returns to make sure we got enough air. Tell them those steps that you're going to do so that when you do it, you're earning trust. Right. So I kind of phrase that as sit and talk, walk and look. And then at the end, I'm going to say, hey, at the end, I'm going to give you what you want, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, which is I'll sit down with you at that point then and kind of review what the result is. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to plant some seeds. Like one of the things that we've talked about is, do we do a good job in our industry of offering financing to the homeowner? And the answer is we don't do a great job at it. Even the companies that say we do it often don't do it well. So this goes back to that begin with the end in mind. If at the end I'm going to offer the homeowner financing, I have to do it at the beginning so that it makes sense and lines up. So my outcomes step, I'm going to say something like this. Mary, at the end, we'll be able to sit down. I'll have taken some measurements. I'll have a good idea of what everything costs. So we'll look at pricing. There's some different models that we'll look at and discuss the differences and pros and cons of those. We'll talk through payment, how people afford a system. You may write a check or put it on a credit card. We work with the manufacturer who has a financing program. We can talk through that. We've got some great promos. Mary will also talk about some manufacturer rebates. There's a utility rebate from your utility company. There's a tax credit available this year. So I'm throwing out these hooks in the water from a fishing standpoint to see where I get a nibble. And even if I don't get a nibble on any of them right then, I've planted those seeds so we can come back and kind of hit those later on. So that I think that's key is kind of fleshing out my agenda, explain to the homeowner what I'm actually going to do, and then really kind of hone in on the outcomes. And it might sound a little bit like this, and it feels abrupt at first if you've never done this on a sales call. But going back to what you said at the very beginning, which is no's. I mean, if we can get a no, a quick no, boy, it's helpful. It's helpful for me in my career. It's helpful for you as the buyer. So I'm going to say something like this, Mary, at the end of the call today, here's kind of what we'll do is if everything looks good, you'll pull out your calendar. I'll pull out my calendar. I'll know at that point, does it take us 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? What are we doing? I'll be able to tell you all that. We'll look at the calendar to see how far out are we booked? When are you available? One of the other outcomes, though, Mary, is that you may say something like, Stephen, I'm not interested in moving forward with you. And that's fine. If you could just let me know, Mary, that way I'm not calling you every other day to go, hey, did you make a decision yet? Hey, because the last thing you want is a sales guy bugging you, right? So that's one hand. I'm trying to get you to feel comfortable saying no. And then here's a little bit of psychology where we would call it equal business stature. I got to be able to say no too. And so I might say something like this, Mary, if for any reason I don't think we would be a good fit on this job, are you okay if I let you know that? And just say, hey, I don't think we're going to be a good fit on this, and we might need to back out or bow out. And so that kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, because you know how most contractors back out of a job? They just charge a crazy price.
Yeah. And And this, what's interesting, talking to homeowners and just go, how's it going in your buying experience? I mean, I have friends of mine that complain to me about any type of contractor at all. They think it's all my fault because whatever. But I have a friend who's trying to get some electrical work done. They've had 3 contractors come out and look at it. All 3 said they would get back to them with a quote, and weeks later, not a single one of them has. And they're just so frustrated. And maybe it's an example of the contractor doesn't want the work, or maybe they're just too busy, or maybe there's other jobs they want to do, or maybe they're just sloppy and they're not good business people, and so they're losing track of estimates. But, I think enough people have had those scenarios where if I said, hey, if there's any issue on our end, either we can't schedule you, we're booked out too far, we don't think we'd be a good fit, I'm just going to let you know up front. Is it okay would you be okay if I let you know that? And it does a couple things. I mean, one is it makes homeowners kind of sit up sometimes and go, well, why might I not be a good fit? Or why would you turn down my business, right? And I got to be prepared to explain that. And one of the things I would say is, well, Mary, we do everything by the book. And so we're going to have to pull a permit. When we have a permit pulled, we got to do inspections, right? And so the reason for that is that it protects you, it protects us. Occasionally we have a homeowner that would say, I don't want to pull a permit because whatever. I wired up my back garage myself and I don't want the code inspector to see that. Well, that's a problem for me because he's going to come out and inspect the heating and air electrical to see what we did. And he's going to notice that. So that would be a scenario where I would say, both as a sales rep and as a business owner, we might not be a good fit for this customer. Because the last thing we want to do is do an install that's not up to code. We have a problem. We burn your house to the ground. And now we're on the hook because we did something wrong because we didn't pull a permit. We shortcut the process. So it's fairly easy to explain that to a homeowner. The problem isn't the homeowner. The problem is salespeople are uncomfortable talking about outcomes at the beginning of a sales call. But I'm telling you, there is nothing that made me more money over the course of my career in sales than being gutsy enough to talk about outcomes at the beginning of the sales call. And it just gets people, you're letting them know, hey, today we're going to make a decision.
Well, we were going to call this podcast something like, business basics or, setting effective meetings, but maybe we should just call it like, how did Steven make more money?
Well, I mean, everything like psychology is great. I like talking about psychology, but all I really care about is how's this going to help me in my day-to-day world, right? And so if that's just
not a bad thing either.
Pie in the sky psychology, fascinating. If it's going to help me make more money, now I'm paying attention. So
let's go. That's true. No, I think it's all true. And again, like our goal is never to approach these topics as they're just so basic and they're just so easy and you're just going to do it and it's just going to be great. Like this does take practice, and it's self-admittedly on this podcast, right? Like you and I were both not good at this and had to find ways to run some reps and get better at it. And, for me, it was talking out loud to myself in my car a lot. I like to rehearse like what I'm going to say a little bit so that when I do it with a customer, it sounds more natural. My general flow is to just treat every conversation like a conversation. I don't like to put too much professional tone on things because it doesn't feel authentic to me. And that's a huge part of my personal branding is authenticity. So practice, saying it out loud and being true to who you are, using words that you would say that are appropriate. But, just being true to your vernacular is really important. And then along with that too, getting comfortable doing it over and over and over again.
I think that's one of the advantages to in-home sales versus, when I first became a client of Sandler, I had some other people in the class who were selling other things, whether it was commercial real estate or health insurance or whatever. And they may work all week to prospect and find leads. And they really only ran, say, 2 sales calls in a week, right? Mm-hmm. Everything else was the activity to get to the sales call. Where with in-home sales, I was running 2-3 calls a day. And so a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, my proficiency was much better than some of my peers. And then when I kind of took that sales process into the B2B world, I just was better at it than a lot of my peers just because I had more repetitions. But the practice is the key, right? I mean, just doing something repeatedly but sucking at it, that doesn't help.
No,
You
no.
gotta improve, right?
Yeah, and it's just like anything that you're gonna develop and be better at over time. You just gotta keep working on it. And I think maybe what's challenging for the same reason, right? Because you're running more calls. If you're not good at it and you're not getting good results, then it starts to feel like why am I even doing this? And this is so hard and I'm never gonna get it. And anyone who's ever accomplished anything difficult has had that feeling when they've started it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and if were trying to do something in a physical fitness space or, something like that, it's like it's never easy to get those first reps running.
Yep.
But then once you do it,
I'm
you
with
get that
you.
sense of, you get that sense of accomplishment and you do it. So, well, there's no gatekeeping here, right? I mean, we are just talking about like real strategies and real conversations that we've had around this. But our goal to revisit our desired outcomes is to get people better at these skills, better at setting an agenda, better at creating good expectations, and really calling out objectives that are going to get us to our desired end result, which, really generally speaking is a decision, right? And it's either that quick yes or that quick no.
Yeah. And it's probably the challenge. I mean, if sales reps say, hey, I'm struggling with time management, I'm struggling to grow my territory, or it's an in-home sales rep who's like, hey, my closing ratio is low, the leads suck, right? I mean, sometimes I hear those types of things. Like, this is really where we start to roll up our sleeves and go, how good are you at that piece of it? And again, it's not the phone call I get. The phone call I get is, hey, help my sales guys be better closers. And the reality of it is a lot of times to be a better closer, you got to be better the first 10 to 15 minutes in the house, or better first 10, 15 minutes in the meeting. And if you can get really, really good at those first 10 minutes, then closing gets a lot easier. And so it really is a skill. And it's something that, if you're thinking it's not a skill, I just do it naturally, you don't have the skill. It's something that does take effort. I mean, nobody's born with that. It's something you got to work on.
Definitely true. Well, as always, Stephen, thanks so much for just sharing more of your world and your insights. It's always it's a treat for me. So I hope our listeners agree.
That's fun to hear about your side of the business as well. You ready for the email address one more time? I'm getting good at it.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So we want feedback. We want feedback. Good, ugly, bad, but topics of suggestions, things that you think we should be covering. HVAC_full_blast@tranetechnologies.com. Send us some feedback.
Perfect. He's Stephen Ross. I'm Mary Carter, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks.